You cannot resurrect what you refuse to bury. That is the first law. That is the first sword. That is the first flame. I have seen people cry out for change while clinging to the corpse of who they used to be. And so I ask you plainly, what are you still trying to keep alive that God already called finished? The struggle you feel, the stuckness, the slow suffocation in the same patterns is not because you are weak. It is not because you are broken. It is not because you lack discipline or drive or faith. It is because you are over-identified with the old garment. You are dressed in delay, cloaked in shame, wearing the robe of someone who once thought they had to earn love, hustle for acceptance, or bow to scarcity. But that garment has become grave clothes. You are not stuck. You are still calling yourself by a name you were never meant to keep. I speak with the voice of spiritual law now, with the fire of divine remembrance, with the sword of metaphysical truth. And I say this with holy love. Your false identity must be buried. It must be spoken dead. It must be surrendered so violently to truth that the lie cannot find a place to return. No more patching old wineskins. No more repeating decrees of defeat. No more dragging the story of your suffering into the sanctuary of your rising. The altar is ready. The tomb is waiting. The Spirit of God is hovering. And it asks one thing. Will you let the old you die? Do not say you want wealth while you speak as one who fears increase. Do not cry out for love while you carry the voice of rejection. Do not beg for peace while making war with yourself every morning. What must die for your wealth to rise? What must be buried for your love to awaken? What must you burn so your peace can be born? This is not self-help. This is soul surgery. This is not motivation. This is the resurrection. I do not come to comfort your ego. I come to call forth your spirit. You were never meant to adjust to lack, to manage pain, or to memorize failure as identity. You were called, carved, and crowned with glory. And anything that does not agree with the I am must fall away, not slowly, not someday, but now. Declare it with me. I now lay down the false. I bury the old. I rise in the name of my new. This is the beginning, the sentence that starts the separation, the word that swings the sword. For as long as you believe you are your past, your patterns, your personality, you will repeat them. But when you speak from the high place, from the secret door, from the fire of the word, then even death must obey. You are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And that holy self, the true self, the God-named self, is not waiting. It is rising. Two selves cannot rule the same body. Just as light and shadow cannot hold dominion in the same place at the same time, so too the false self and the Christ self cannot share the throne of your consciousness. Either the ego rules with its chains of fear, or Christ speaks with the scepter of truth. But one must speak louder. One must be lifted up. One must be dethroned. I have watched many souls try to serve two masters, on the surface declaring truth, yet in the secret chambers of their mind, still bowing to the voice of limitation, fear, pride, and control. That is the voice of the ego, the small self, the identity built from wounds, memories, and the illusion of separation. It is the part of you that says, "Protect yourself when love arrives." It whispers, "Who do you think you are?" when opportunity calls. It screams, "Be realistic," when spirit begins to unfold the miraculous. And so I teach you the law of substitution, not as theory but as spiritual surgery. You must speak one down and speak the other up. You must choose which voice will live through your mouth. Will you speak as one rejected or as one redeemed? Will you affirm what the world taught you or what heaven already wrote of you? You cannot say, "I am unworthy" and "I am divine" in the same breath without splitting your energy and fracturing your field. The ego is not cast out with force. It is starved with silence. It is replaced with word. It is substituted with rhythm. Every time you say, I am poor, you crown the ego king. But when you say, I am abundance made manifest, you resurrect Christ in you. When you say, I am broken, the old self weeps. But when you say, I am whole by the word of God, the tomb begins to shake. You do not fight the old self. You do not argue with the false voice. You do not wrestle with shadows. You replace them with light. You lift up the truth until the lie has no air to breathe. You speak as if heaven is already inside you because it is. You declare as if God is your breath because He is. You substitute every sentence born of fear with one forged in faith. You override the old recording with a new decree. This is why I give affirmations. This is why I demand repetition. Not to encourage shallow parroting, but to establish dominion. For repetition is rhythm, and rhythm is reprogramming. The law of substitution is the law of spoken exchange, and it begins with one sentence, said with conviction, repeated until it becomes flesh. I am not the old, I am the risen. Speak this not once but daily, not as a chant, but as command. For the voice you lift is the self you resurrect, and the Christ self in you waits not for permission, but for declaration. Will you give it voice today? Will you name it true? Then speak. For what you say must live, and what you silence must die. What you call yourself becomes your life, not someday, not eventually, immediately. Your word creates your world. Your declaration builds the structure your spirit must live inside. Your identity is not shaped by circumstances, it is sculpted by speech. The most sacred question you must answer is not, what happened to me, but rather, what do I call myself now? For identity is not remembered, it is pronounced. It is not inherited from man, it is inherited from spirit and activated through the mouth. The word says, let the weak say, I am strong. Not, let the strong boast of their strength, but let the weak, those in deficit, in brokenness, in depletion, speak forth the very opposite of their appearance. Why? Because truth is not reactive. Truth is not based on condition. Truth is creative. Truth calls things that be not as though they were. And when you speak from truth, you are not lying, you are resurrecting. When you say, I am strong, you are not denying your weakness, you are displacing it. You are letting it die. You are summoning the you that God already finished before the world began. The old self clings to titles forged in pain. I'm not enough. I'm the black sheep. I'm always behind. I'm the anxious one. I'm the failure. These are not identities. They are spiritual contracts written in fear and shame. And every time you repeat them, you renew the lease of the old self. You give the tomb permission to stay sealed. You make the false name your address. But the moment you say, I am chosen, I am free, I am divinely guided, I am wealth in form, I am radiant love, the old self trembles. Its contract is broken. The name tag falls off. A new you begins to emerge. Let me say it with fire in my bones. Your mouth is your resurrection tool. Your sentence is your spiritual scaffolding. If you want to become someone new, do not wait for the world to confirm it. Speak it until your cells agree. Speak it until heaven echoes back. Speak it until the mirror smiles in recognition. This is why every healing, every miracle, every awakening I have seen began not with effort, but with utterance. A woman who said, I am the head and not the tail, and watched her finances reverse. A man who said, I am forgiven, and walked out of addiction. A child who said, I am wanted, and felt peace for the first time. These weren't affirmations. They were identity shifts, decrees, announcements of the eternal self stepping forward and the old self stepping down. So I ask you now, beloved soul, what have you called yourself lately? And more importantly, what will you call yourself next? The answer is not far. It is as close as your breath. For the word is nigh thee, even in thy mouth. Speak, say, declare. For what you call yourself, you become. And what you refuse to speak cannot rise. You are not healed by hiding wounds. You are healed by speaking death to the lie that those wounds define you. The law of release is not gentle. It is not therapeutic. It is not halfway, and it does not negotiate with the old self. It crucifies it. For there can be no resurrection without a burial, no crown without a cross, no transformation without the tearing down of the false identity. The lie must die. The mask must fall. The voice of fear must be silenced, not with passivity, but with divine authority. What is the lie that has ruled your life? That you will always struggle, that love is not for you, that success belongs to others, that your past disqualifies your future? These are not just thoughts. These are spiritual agreements. And every time you repeat them, you crucify your true self and enthrone your limitation. But I tell you now, by spiritual law, you can reverse the crucifixion. You can speak the death of the lie and resurrect the truth. You can break the agreement with the old voice and sign a new covenant with divine identity. But first, you must release. Release is not repression. Release is not spiritual denial. It is declaration. It is crucifixion by the word. It is looking at the face of the false self and saying, "You are not who I am. You are the projection of fear, and I no longer serve you. I release the need to be wounded. I release the identity of lack. I release the repetition of the story. I release the crown of thorns I kept wearing in shame. I lay it down now." Jesus did not climb down from the cross. He surrendered to it, knowing that surrender was the doorway to dominion. So must you. You must choose with holy bravery to let the old voice die, not patch it, not medicate it, not explain it, but speak its death with fire. Say, "This self no longer rules me. This pattern no longer feeds me. This fear no longer names me. I speak the death of every false story. I crucify the counterfeit, and I rise in the power of who I truly am." This is the law of release, not by hiding, not by hoping, but by hurling the old self onto the altar of truth and watching it burn. You are not what happened to you. You are not your lowest moment. You are not the false identity you crafted to survive. That self must go, and it does not leave quietly. It leaves when it is told to. It leaves when it is named and denied. It leaves when your word says, "Enough." If you're still clinging, still repeating, still justifying the old story, you are not yet free. You are still in the tomb. But if today you feel the tremble, the righteous revolt within, then open your mouth and speak its ending. Declare it. Not to your mind, not to your journal, but to the spirit realm that responds to every word. Speak death to the lie. Speak life to the truth. Speak as one who is not afraid to bury what no longer belongs. For until something dies, nothing new can live. Until you release the lie, you cannot wear the truth. And until you crucify the counterfeit, your crown will wait unworn. Let it die, beloved. Let it die now, and watch what rises. I now speak to every listener whose soul has grown weary from carrying the weight of an identity that was never divinely authored. You have been loyal to a version of yourself shaped by fear, built in the shadows of lack, trained in the language of doubt. That self has spoken over your finances, dictated your relationships, governed your decisions, and now it must die. I do not say this with sentimentality. I say it with divine force. Your resurrection begins with a funeral, and the one to be buried is the small, afraid, double-minded self you've mistakenly called me. You have obeyed its voice, agreed with its verdicts, and rehearsed its lines until your subconscious wore them as truth. I always mess it up. I'm not good with money. People always leave. These are not harmless phrases. These are spiritual contracts. And today, by divine law, I instruct you to break them. You must declare, I no longer serve the voice of fear. I no longer walk in agreement with the defeated self. I do not carry the corpse of an expired identity into a future ordained for glory. The word says, "Let the weak say, I am strong." It does not say, "Let the weak explain why they are weak." Your freedom begins not in therapy, not in introspection, but in declaration. I speak the word of release. I call out the old names: failure, addict, broken, unlucky, unwanted, behind, unworthy, and I say, die. You are no longer permitted to live in the house of my being. I nullify the curses I have spoken, and I sever the spell of every word that did not originate in divine love. If you knew the power of your voice, you would never again speak idly about yourself. The spiritual world responds not to emotion, but to authority. And authority is expressed in rhythm, in precision, in spoken truth. You must call your old self what it is: a counterfeit, an imposter formed by the ego, trained by survival, and enforced by repetition. But repetition does not make something true. It makes it familiar. And what is familiar is not always aligned. I ask you now, which phrases have you repeated in fear that you must now declare dead by the sword of the word? Name them, face them, and then speak. I render you powerless. I erase you with light. I bury you in truth. And I rise. I rise as one born of divine DNA, authorized by heaven to walk in dominion. This is not just self-talk. This is resurrection language. The old self cannot follow you where the blessing lives. The vibration of fear cannot stand at the gates of provision. Let the dead bury the dead. You walk forward. If you feel resistance in your body, if your mind tries to negotiate a compromise with the old patterns, remind it. That self is gone. That mind was ruled by fear. That pattern was upheld by agreement. And I no longer agree. I agree with God. I agree with divine justice. I agree with multiplication, healing, overflow, perfect timing, perfect love, and my perfect place in it all. I release the agreements of delay, of shame, of poverty, of unworthiness. I cancel them by the blood of truth. This is your moment of release, and not a quiet release, a spoken one. Speak the release aloud because the body follows the voice. Say it with me now. I do not mourn the old self, I bury it. I do not negotiate with fear, I silence it. I do not delay my rising, I declare it. This is not a suggestion, this is spiritual law. Speak it, and the wall falls. Speak it, and the new self emerges. Speak it, and the dead will know you are no longer their home. Every morning is a resurrection, and every morning requires a funeral. You cannot rise in new power until you speak death to the old lie. The soul does not evolve by accident, it ascends by decree. Therefore, the first business of the morning is not coffee, not headlines, not scrolling through the world's hypnosis. It is the burial of the false self, the one who failed yesterday, the one who feared, the one who flinched in the face of opportunity and crawled back into the familiar grave of shame. That self is not allowed to rise with you. That self must be declared dead. I bury yesterday's defeat. I release yesterday's doubt. I cast out the voice that told me I am not ready. This is not sentiment. It is surgery. And spiritual surgery is done by the spoken word. The power of the tongue is not limited to healing. It is also the scalpel that cuts away the false identity. The moment you open your eyes, you must open your mouth. You must speak before the world speaks over you. You must command before circumstance begins to whisper. You must claim the altar of identity before fear sets fire to your day. And so I say every morning, today I rise. Today the old dies. Today the lie is laid to rest, and I ascend as the truth. Let this become your morning drumbeat. Let it become the rhythm of your rising. Your voice is the trumpet at Jericho. The walls fall when the decree is spoken. Do not wait for the world to validate your rising. Do not wait for the absence of fear to act in faith. Do not wait for the feeling of power to speak from your dominion. You are not buried by failure, you are buried by silence. And you are not raised by circumstances, you are raised by the word. Speak it before you see it. Say it before you feel it. Decree it before you believe it. That is how the divine law works. The subconscious is not moved by theory. It is moved by repetition. Rhythm is the language of the body, and your word must become the rhythm of resurrection. Not once, not twice, but daily, faithfully, audibly. This is not motivational language. This is metaphysical law. What you repeat, you resurrect. What you bless, you breathe life into. And what you bury in silence, you are condemned to relive. Therefore, I say again, and I say it loud, today I rise. Today, the old dies. Today I walk as the new creature, and nothing of yesterday may follow me. Speak it. Live it. Rise. You must now learn to speak not from your wounds, not from your history, not from your lack, but from the throne. You must learn to speak from dominion. For when I say, speak as the risen, I do not mean to pretend, I do not mean to mimic what you are not. I mean to step boldly into the voice of the new creation and speak the world into alignment with your true self. You do not rise by wishing, you rise by word. Let there be light was not a plea, it was a decree. And until your mouth stops echoing the language of the grave, the stone will not roll away. You may be breathing, yes, but if your words are still saturated with fear, with loss, with I can't and I don't know how, then you are still speaking from the tomb. You are not stuck, you are not behind, you are simply out of sync with the rhythm of resurrection. So what is the rhythm? It is this: I am the new self and I walk as the risen. I do not beg, I bless, I do not chase, I magnetize, I do not fear, I decree. When I say I speak from the throne, I mean this. I speak from authority, not emotionalism, not reaction, not anxiety. I speak from the invisible seat of dominion that has already been given me. You must speak from the place where nothing is missing. The risen self lacks nothing. It is not trying to earn. It is not trying to prove. It is not trying to survive. It is here to rule. It is here to declare the unseen as seen, the impossible as inevitable, the new as now. Speak not as a seeker, speak as one sent. Now listen to me. Your life is not waiting for you to earn more, heal more, journal more, beg more. Your life is waiting for your tongue to align with truth. Your new name is the key. Your new identity is the weapon, and your word is the seed. Until you call yourself what God calls you, you will keep circling the wilderness of half-manifested good. You say, I'm trying. Number speak, I am doing. You say, I'm healing. Number speak, I am whole. You say, I hope. Number speak, I decree. The tomb rolls open for the one who speaks from the throne. And no man, no circumstance, no appearance can shut what your mouth has opened in faith. Do not walk as the wounded. Walk as the word made flesh. I have seen the impossible bow to one spoken line. I have seen dead finances breathe again when one man said, I am abundance walking. I have seen sick bodies shift at the name, I am the healed of the Lord. Your word is not a wish, it is a spiritual sword. And when wielded from the risen self, it divides between lie and truth, lack and supply, death and dominion. Speak now as the new creation. Speak now as one who has already walked out of the grave. And when you speak, do not look for confirmation in the outer. Look to the inner witness. Look to the unshakable knowing that your word is the law of your life. Say it. I walk as the risen. I speak from the throne, and nothing can stand against my word. Let this be the new language of your life. Let this be your mouth's eternal resurrection. You must learn to hear the difference between the voice of affliction and the voice of ascension. One is a beggar, the other a king. The voice of affliction always starts with fear. It says, "What if this doesn't work? What if they leave? What if I fail?" It is the soundtrack of Egypt, the moan of the old man carrying burdens he was never meant to bear. It echoes with the cadence of bondage, convincing you that suffering is permanent, that your struggle is sacred, that delay is noble. It wraps the soul in drama and calls it destiny. But I say to you, no man rises while his mouth agrees with affliction. The tongue is the rudder. You cannot speak defeat and arrive at dominion. The Israelites did not enter the promised land until the old generation, the murmurers, had died off. Even God would not allow a complaining tongue to inherit his promise. Your words must match your resurrection, or you will wander in circles, praying with one hand and cursing with the other. Train your mouth, therefore, to only know the tone of blessing. Speak from the risen seat of self. Speak as one who already reigns. You must learn to recognize the difference. Affliction says, "It's hard, it's unfair, it's too late." But ascension says, "All things are now being added unto me." Affliction says, "Nothing ever works for me." Ascension says, "Everything is working together for my good." Affliction is loud and rehearsed, familiar like an old hymn of worry. Ascension is still, firm, and magnetic. One contracts, the other expands. One curses the field, the other sows the seed. You must not let affliction write the script of your life with your own tongue. The mouth is a temple. Do not offer the sacrifice of complaint on its altar. Let no unclean word proceed from it. Speak not what your fear believes. Speak what your Christ knows. For I tell you, the resurrection does not begin in the grave. It begins in the mouth. So now I ask you, what is the dominant vibration of your voice? Do you speak as the risen man or the afflicted one? Do you cast yourself down with subtle self-pity, or do you cast mountains into the sea with a whisper of truth? The word is not neutral. It either multiplies your heaven or lengthens your wilderness. Every time you open your mouth, you choose which world you live in. So open it carefully. Open it like a gate. Let it release honey, not poison. Let it open tombs, not seal them. For life and death are in the power of the tongue, and you will eat its fruit. Bitter or blessed, choose. Let the weak say, "I am strong." Let the poor say, "I am rich." Let the fearful say, "I am bold." Not because of what they see, but because of who they are now aligned with. For when your words match your ascension, your reality must rise to meet them. Your mouth was never meant to report appearances. Your mouth was meant to create them. So stop describing the cross. Speak the resurrection. Speak the throne. Speak the inheritance. Speak as if the stone has already rolled away, because in truth, it has. There is a sound that chains make when they rattle in the soul. It is the tone of affliction. I have heard it in the words of men who speak defeat before the day has begun. I have seen it in the mouths of women who whisper sickness over their children. I have heard it in church pews, in drawing rooms, in meetings of business and family, in the trembling confessions of those who do not know they are prophesying their own bondage. They say, "I can't make it. It's always been this way. Money slips through my fingers. People don't love like they used to. The world is getting darker. It never works for me." These are the phrases of affliction. These are the hymns of Egypt. They do not come from heaven. They come from history. They do not proceed from the Christ within. They proceed from the wounded echo of former selves who never dared to die and therefore never rose. Affliction has a voice, and so does ascension. I ask you now, which tone have you trained your mouth to carry? Do you speak as one who is still buried in the tomb of lack, loss, illness, and confusion? Or do you speak as one who has rolled away the stone and walked into a morning of miracles? The mouth does not lie. You may claim to believe in abundance, yet speak of expenses. You may say you trust divine timing and still curse delays. You may kneel in prayer for healing, but rise with the tone of complaining. This is not resurrection. This is rehearsal. rehearsing the life you no longer want with the words that keep it alive. The word is a resurrection instrument. With it, Jesus called forth Lazarus. With it, you call forth your true self. The grave clothes are removed by the word, not by effort. Loose him and let him go, said Jesus. The resurrected tone does not plead, it commands. It does not describe the tomb, it names the promise. It does not echo history, it heralds heaven. Speak as one who has already risen. Speak as one who cannot die. Speak as one whose treasure is not in the hands of men, but in the vaults of divine law. Speak the blessing before the miracle arrives, for the blessing is the miracle's oxygen. To those who ask, how will I know if I am speaking from affliction or from ascension? I say this. When you speak from affliction, your words close in on you. They shrink your vision. They dim the light. They chain your thoughts and reduce your days. But when you speak from ascension, you rise in your own hearing. Your soul stands tall within you. Your chest opens. Your spine straightens. Your tone becomes clear. You feel your divine authority reawaken. For you are not a beggar, you are an heir. You are not waiting to be delivered. You are the one who speaks deliverance. I do not tolerate the language of defeat in my world. I do not negotiate with lack. I do not entertain the tone of affliction. I train the mouth to carry blessing. I train the lips to name what God has promised. I anoint my language with heaven. I bless before the harvest. I decree before the deposit. I call before I see. For this is the pattern of the risen life. Speak blessing until your bones believe it. Speak truth until your atmosphere shifts. Speak life until every tomb in your soul cracks open and light rushes in. Let this be your daily discipline. Listen to your voice. Hear your tone. Do not just ask what you say. Ask how you say it. Correct your own cadence. When affliction sneaks into your speech, arrest it. When defeat creeps into your declarations, cast it out. When fear finds its way to your lips, substitute it with faith. For the word is a two-edged sword, and you are either using it to sever your chains or to slit your future. Today, I say aloud, and I invite you to say with me, my tone is resurrected. My mouth is holy. My voice is the voice of dominion. And so it is. You must be ruthless in your rewriting. The past is not your identity unless your tongue keeps dragging it forward. I say unto you, stop embalming your past with your words. Stop breathing life into what no longer serves your kingdom. Every time you say, I've always been anxious, you appoint anxiety as ruler of your present. Every time you say, I've never been good with money, you nail your own finances to a cross of limitation. You were not called to echo bondage. You were called to declare liberty. You must make a break in the invisible before the visible can shift. And so I instruct you. Stand before your inner tribunal and speak judgment upon every false label you've ever worn. Say aloud, I am no longer small. I am no longer the wounded one. I am no longer the afterthought, the broken branch, the almost success. Every one of these phrases is a shovel to bury the corpse of the counterfeit self, and unless it is buried, it shall keep rising to haunt your harvest. I have said in my teachings, the subconscious mind records like a phonographic plate. Every word is etched into the soul like a groove in wax. If you do not break the old record, it shall keep playing its melody of misfortune. So I say, take up the hammer of the word and shatter it. Say, I am no longer the one who lacks. I am no longer the one who fears. I am no longer the one who waits. You must not simply think these phrases, you must proclaim them. The word is God in action, and what you speak into the law shall return unto you pressed down, shaken together, and running over. I said in the game of life and how to play it, speak these words aloud with power and conviction. For it is not silent wishing that moves mountains, but spoken dominion. When the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they left behind the chains of Pharaoh. They did not drag the memory of Egypt into their new land. But you, many of you, try to enter your promised future while still speaking the tongue of bondage. You say, I'm trying to change. Stop trying. Begin declaring. You say, I'm healing. Say instead, I am whole now. You say, I don't know if I can. Say instead, I am backed by the infinite. I can do all things through the Christ within. This is how you burn the false record with truth. Not by sentiment, not by journaling, not by endlessly analyzing the old tape, but by setting fire to it with the matchstick of the word. Your mouth is the altar, your phrase is the offering, and your faith is the fire. Say it, I am no longer living under the old name. Say it again until the vibration becomes your new skin, until the labels peel away, until the atmosphere changes. Say it until the heavenlies rearrange themselves to mirror your courage. I once said, let the weak say, I am strong. I did not say, let the weak analyze their weakness. I did not say, let the weak get validated. No, I said say. The word is the gateway. The word is the weapon. The word is the rewiring. So now, beloved listener, take up your divine pen and write. I am no longer afraid of my own power. I am no longer loyal to struggle. I am no longer at war with myself. And once you have written, speak it aloud until the atmosphere shudders, until your old self hears it from its grave and trembles, until only the truth remains. This is how resurrection begins, with a tongue that buries the lie and an identity born from flame. Speak now. The old self is on trial, and only the word shall judge. Let it be guilty, and let the new self rise. You cannot walk in dominion while wearing the rags of your former name. The tongue is the chiseler of reality, and what you say about yourself becomes the image etched upon your life. The law is simple and inescapable. What you name, you become. If you say, I'm always late, the law bows to that command and ensures delay. If you say, I'm just not consistent, then inconsistency is made flesh. Words are not passive. They are projectiles. They are blueprints. They are summons. The subconscious does not argue. It obeys. And so long as you call yourself by the names of weakness, so long shall your life walk in the garments of delay, disorder, and disappointment. What you decree about yourself builds the temple or the tomb of your identity. You must choose which it shall be. The old self will offer you phrases like comfortable chains. It will say, I'm a procrastinator. And you will nod in agreement, not realizing you've just invoked delay into your destiny. But I tell you now, there is no such thing as a harmless label. Every phrase you attach to your I am either glorifies God or magnifies limitation. There is no neutral speech. There is no idle word. To say I'm shy, or I'm unlucky, or I'm broke is not just self-description. It is spiritual self-sabotage. You are throwing down altars to error and kneeling before them in ignorance. But the moment you awaken, the moment you renounce the false names and reclaim your true title, everything changes. The spiritual man knows to declare, I speak, and it is done. He does not say, I'm trying. He does not say, I'm hoping. He says, I am the resurrection and the life of every buried promise in my soul. When the old self whispers, you always mess it up, the spiritual man replies, I am order, I am precision, I am the voice of completion. When the lie arises, you've never followed through. The truth rises higher and says, I walk in divine discipline and perfect execution. I am led, I am obedient, I am crowned. Scripture does not say, let the weak say, I'm trying to get stronger. It says, let the weak say, I am strong. This is not spiritual suggestion, it is law. It is identity through declaration. It is the spiritual crucifixion of the false self through the spoken word of God. You must say what Spirit says about you, even when the evidence mocks you. Even when the outer world screams contradiction, your inner world must remain anchored in divine description. You are not your habits, you are not your past, you are not your trauma, you are what you call yourself today. So I ask you now, what names must die? What self-labels must be buried that the Christ identity may rise in you? Take inventory of the phrases you say when you are frustrated, when you are tired, when you are hurt. Do you say, "That's just how I am"? Or do you say, "That's who I was, but I speak a new name over myself now"? The Israelites could not inherit the promised land while calling themselves grasshoppers. And neither can you inherit wealth, love, dominion, or divine assignment while calling yourself small. Speak up. Speak true. Speak strong. You are not waiting to become something. You are naming what already is, and the universe obeys. The law is this: what I name, I claim. What I bless becomes bold. What I decree becomes me. Speak no longer as a victim of delay, fear, or failure. Say instead, I am the image and likeness of divine completion. I am the spoken success of heaven made visible. I speak, and it is done. My beloved, you must understand the secret law of death that gives way to resurrection. You are not waiting for a new self to be delivered unto you. You are called to bury the old self first. You cannot resurrect what you refuse to declare dead. Most people linger in suffering, not because they are bound by circumstance, but because they are still in covenant with their former self-image. They speak to it daily. They feed it their attention. They rehearse its wounds, its disappointments, its narrative of limitation. But today I say to you, speak to the old self as if it were a stranger trespassing in your house of truth. Turn to it in bold authority and say, you are no longer needed. I release you. I no longer serve your memory, your shame, or your fear. You were a costume for my learning, but I am no longer cast in that part. This is not poetic metaphor. It is spiritual surgery. The old man must die, and you must be the one to write his eulogy with your words of truth. For the old self lives in the tomb of your repetition. It survives only because you keep visiting its grave, dressing it with flowers of nostalgia and mourning. But I tell you now, the grave is empty unless you fill it with life again. The body of your past identity is lifeless unless your word resurrects it. So I instruct you to go to that inner grave and speak a final word over it. Declare, I am not who I was. I no longer answer to the voice of fear, lack, or self-hatred. That version of me is buried in divine silence. I walk in newness of identity. The Christ within you never calls you by your history. He calls you by your destiny. He says, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus cannot rise unless death first claims the shroud. You must allow what no longer serves you to stink, to decay, to fall from memory, not with bitterness, but with divine finality. In my teachings I have said, man must prepare for the good he desires. But preparation also means making room. You cannot pour new wine into old skins. You cannot live resurrected while dragging the carcass of your old self behind you. Your good is waiting for a name it can attach to, and the name must be renewed. Let the weak say, I am strong. That is not denial. That is replacement. That is resurrection speech. Speak not about what happened. Speak to it. Address it like a fading spirit in the shadow and say, your purpose is fulfilled. You have no power here. When you speak like this, heaven records your courage, and the cells of your being begin to reconfigure around the word you have spoken. Many speak of healing, but they avoid crucifixion. They want resurrection without burial. But I tell you, there is no rebirth without relinquishment, no transformation without a tomb. If you want to rise, you must declare the burial complete. Not someday, but today. Not once emotionally, but repeatedly with your spoken word. Speak to the wound and say, you are no longer necessary. Speak to the shame and say, "You are no longer my name." Speak to the fearful voice and say, "You may go in peace, for I no longer live where you reside." This is not spiritual warfare, it is spiritual clearance. The old self cannot argue with a word spoken in spiritual dominion. And when you speak, speak without apology. Let the dead bury their dead. You must rise and walk as a new creature in Christ. You are not your memories, your failures, or the projections of those who never saw your truth. You are the word you now declare. So let that word be bold, be final, and be filled with light. The grave is ready. Your new life is not waiting for a miracle, it is waiting for a burial. Speak it, declare it, and watch how heaven begins to move. I have said it before, and I will say it again with power. What you behold, you become. The mirror does not lie, but it reflects what you command. Most people look into the mirror and repeat their defeats. They say, "I am tired." They say, "I don't have enough." They say, "I am aging." And so they reinforce the picture of the dying self. They reinforce the husk, not the seed. They mirror the curse, not the blessing. But I declare to you this hour, that mirror has no power until you give it a prophecy. When you speak to your reflection in truth, you do not see a body. You see the resurrection of your word. I tell you plainly, the mirror is not your judge, it is your altar. And every altar requires a declaration. The false self, born of fear, shame, lack, and memory, must die. It must die daily. It must die in every glance that would repeat its old narrative. It must die when you look into your own eyes and choose not to rehearse failure, but to prophesy glory. I have looked at faces drained of light, and I have said, "That is not you, that is the lie wearing your features." And I have commanded them to speak resurrection into their gaze. I see the risen one. Not someday, not after healing. Now, because you are not resurrected by time. You are resurrected by truth. You are not made new by progress. You are made new by pronouncement. What you speak over your reflection, you engrave into your soul. It is written, "Behold, I make all things new." But to behold means to see beyond the mask, to look again, to pierce the appearance and declare the resurrection. So I ask you now, as I have asked my students 1,000 times, who do you see? Are you still prophesying the one who doubts? Are you still reflecting the one who fears? Or have you made a final break with that mask? Have you spoken the funeral words over your old self? Or are you still letting that corpse call the shots? Look again. The mirror is waiting, and the law is listening. Say it with holy audacity. I see the risen one. I see the air. I see the new creation. I see the living word. And then pause. And then receive. You do not need to fix yourself first. You do not need to deserve what you see. You need only to behold with faith, and the Spirit will do the rest. You are not manifesting a better version of your ego. You are not upgrading the caterpillar. You are pronouncing the wings, even while the cocoon still clings to your shoulders, and the law will obey. Many avoid this mirror moment because it feels like madness, because the old self screams to stay alive. But the moment you speak resurrection, heaven records it, and hell trembles. For the one who can look into the mirror and call forth the Christ within, he has already crossed over. She has already risen. The mirror no longer shows a victim, a struggler, a debtor, a doubter. It shows the eternal image, full of glory, power, supply, and peace. That is who you are, but only your word can unveil it. So take your stand today. Pick up the mirror, not as a ritual, but as a scepter. Take $1 and hold it before your face if you must. Take a photograph of your youth. Take your tears if they are all you have. And speak. I see the risen one. Do not whisper it. Do not hope it. Declare it with rhythm, with thunder, with finality. I see the risen one. Say it again until your soul vibrates, until your nervous system yields. until the image in the glass shifts, until your heart knows it to be true. That is the spiritual resurrection, not after the grave, not after the diagnosis, not after the bank clears. Now, for every day you delay this declaration, you empower the mask to rule. But when you speak the resurrection into your own reflection, you have already risen above the grave of your past. And now, beloved, the law is ready, the mirror is ready. Speak, look, rise. There are those who believe that the presence of pain, difficulty, or resistance is proof they are doing something wrong. But I say unto you, it is the opposite. Pain is proof that the lie is breaking. Resistance is the sound of chains rattling as they prepare to fall. Every blow from the adversary is confirmation of your nearness to spiritual birth. The enemy does not roar until you stand at the gate. The furnace is not heated 7 times hotter unless the 4th man is about to appear. When your body trembles and your mind protests, when the old identity begins to panic and scream, it is because the false self is being dethroned by truth. That is not the time to back down or become silent. That is the time to speak louder, to declare more boldly, to stand more still in spiritual authority and say, "This is my hour. I do not retreat. I reign." For too long, the soul has misread the signs. It has mistook discomfort for misalignment, when discomfort is often the shaking of dry bones at the sound of the word. When Lazarus came forth, he did not rise without resistance. He rose wrapped in grave clothes. But Jesus did not say, "Oh dear, he's still bound." Number, he said, "Loose him and let him go." I say the same to you. Loose yourself. Do not interpret resistance as rejection. Do not interpret spiritual contractions as defeat. They are proof that the womb of your becoming is opening. Speak louder. Declare even while the appearance is unmoved, even while the bill is unpaid, even while the fear still whispers. Declare, "This is holy ground, and I am giving birth to the new." I will not mislabel my pain again. I will not retreat from resurrection. The lie wants your silence. The lie wants your reversal. The lie wants your agreement with appearances. But I say, agree with truth and keep speaking. If the tide roars higher, let your voice rise with it. If the flames lick closer, let your praise burn hotter. When the resistance grows, so must the declaration. For the law of reversal states that every outward pressure can become inner power when the word is spoken. No weapon formed against me shall prosper, not because it was never formed, but because I never gave it my agreement. I never crowned it with speech. I never bowed my tongue to its illusion. The enemy cannot hold what I bless. The appearance cannot survive what I decree dead. And resistance cannot stop the rising of a soul who knows its origin in God. I do not argue with fear. I do not debate with doubt. I do not negotiate with appearances. I speak the word, and I walk forward, even if I walk through fire, because I know what Daniel knew, that lions become pillows in the presence of divine authority. I know what the widow knew, that the empty vessel multiplies when the word is obeyed. I know what Mary knew, that even when the world sees no man, the word can still take flesh. So when resistance roars, I do not panic. I prophesy. I speak not as one under trial, but as one who governs trial by truth. I do not flinch. I do not freeze. I do not flee. I fix my eyes upon the invisible, and I say with authority, "You are evidence that I am near. You are proof that I must not stop. You are the final guardian at the tomb of my old self, and I now roll away the stone." Let the resistance rage. It is nothing compared to the word I carry, and the word I carry shall not return void. Every time you spoke lack, you signed a contract. Every time you entertained fear, you signed your name in agreement with bondage. Every time you declared, "I can't, I never, I don't," you bound yourself by invisible oath to an inferior identity. But I tell you, no soul is bound unless they speak it so. The spirit does not recognize the scribbles of fear. It only recognizes the bold ink of truth. Every old belief, every sentence of limitation, every story of defeat you have ever repeated to yourself is nothing more than a spiritual contract drawn up by the enemy of your own making, and I declare it is null and void by the power of your word. I have said before, and I say again, you must speak death to the lie before you can speak life to the truth. If you do not renounce the false identity, you give it power, and what you give power to, you must then serve. You may have believed you were the victim, the failure, the always late, the never picked, the one who gets close but not quite. But these were only lines handed to you by fear, memorized by habit, and recited in the theater of appearances. They were never written by the hand of God. The divine self cannot rise while the false self is still performing. Tear the script, cancel the scene, burn the old contract and declare, that is not my name, that is not my covenant, that is not my inheritance. The law is always waiting for your command. It does not argue, it does not discriminate, it does not hesitate, it acts. So when you say, I am tired, the law says, so be it. When you say, I never win, the law does not comfort you, it confirms you. But the moment you say, I now rip every false agreement with lack, with delay, with defeat, you break the back of the bondage you once called normal. What is normalized in speech becomes legalized in spirit. What is permitted in language becomes permission in the realm of demonstration. Therefore, speak this moment with sacred violence. Every old belief is a signed contract, and I rip it with my word. I dissolve it with my voice. I disown it with my authority. You are not under the law of man, but under the law of the Spirit. And in spiritual court, only one thing has jurisdiction: your word. Not your feelings, not your history, not your trauma, your word. That is the pen that writes your fate. That is the signature that holds divine standing. So if you want to see what your tomorrow holds, ask not your mood, ask your mouth. If you want to rise into new wealth, new love, new power, you must renounce the inheritance of the old self with fire on your tongue. I no longer sign for struggle. I no longer agree with delay. I no longer answer to the name of fear. Say it. Say it until your bones obey it. Say it until the unseen world registers it. Say it until the old contract curls in ash at your feet. He who signed in fear must now speak in fire. He who agreed with suffering must now declare dominion. For you cannot live in truth while cohabiting with lies. You cannot ascend in spirit while anchoring yourself to shame. Tear it up, cancel the covenant, and speak aloud. I walk under no curse. I renew no bondage. I confirm no sentence but the sentence of freedom. The old self dies with a word, and the new self rises on its ashes. Speak now. Burn the old contract, and say only what heaven is allowed to echo. You are not waiting on time. You are not waiting on money. You are not waiting on people. You are waiting on the death of who you used to be, the lie you rehearsed, the fear you obeyed, the image you protected. Every delay in demonstration is a mercy from divine law, for if your blessing arrived while you were still carrying the dead self, it would be swallowed up in confusion, guilt, sabotage, or loss. Your word is not designed to decorate the ego. Your word is the flame that burns it. And so I say, there comes a time in spiritual maturity where you must command the burial. The old self does not die quietly. It bargains, it rehearses, it panics. But I do not allow you to comfort what God has commanded you to crucify. The cross always precedes the crown, and so I give you now a 7-day command, 7 days of sacred spoken substitution, where the death of the lie becomes the birth of the new life. Day 1. Speak this aloud. I revoke every word, every vow, every identity that kept me small, stuck, or in fear. I am no longer in covenant with who I was. Feel that declaration slice the cords of the past. Do not argue with the remnants, just keep speaking. Day 2. I no longer serve my struggle. I no longer perform for approval. I am not my wound. I am the word. This is the day your soul begins to surface. Speak it even through trembling lips. Day 3. I am unavailable to be who I was. I bury the ego with joy. My resurrection has already begun. This is your holy turning. The energy of resistance will flare up to keep your former self alive, but speak louder than it. Walk in circles if you must. Weep if you must. But do not stop. Declare it until your atmosphere shifts. Then, day 4. Now you begin to speak the rising. The old has passed, the new has come. I rise today in perfect union with divine law. Say this as you rise from sleep, as you walk to work, as you hand over money. Let this phrase saturate your system until it echoes in silence. Day 5. I walk as the risen one. I magnetize by identity, not by effort. I release the residue of every old cycle. As you speak this, your field begins to reorder itself. New people, new ideas, new instructions begin to appear, not because you earned it, but because you aligned with it. Day 6. I am not trying to change. I am already made new. And let that be your refrain. You are not fixing what was. You are obeying what is. You are not begging for transformation. You are agreeing with it. Day 7. I am the living proof of resurrection. The old me is unrecognizable. The new me is undeniable. I walk in final authority. This is not repetition, it is resurrection. The word spoken 7 times with full surrender dismantles every fortress of delay. Speak as though you mean it. Speak as though you've already risen. For the only thing standing between your present and your promise is a mouth too timid to command the burial. 7 days, 7 decrees, 1 death, 1 rising. Do not rehearse the dead man's fear. Do not negotiate with the tomb. Speak it, bury it, rise. You must carry the cross before you ever wear the crown. That is the law, and the cross is never outside. It is always inner. It is not what people say, not what life takes, but what the false self screams when it is no longer worshipped. The cross is the burning of pride, the death of old identification, the agony of yielding every idol and every lie we've built our lives around. And yet, it is through that death that the crown descends, not by struggle, but by surrender. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Man suffers because he clings to old habits, false roles, outworn labels, and inherited fears. But truth cannot crown a divided soul. You cannot hold on to the old name and expect to walk in a new nature. The crown rests only on the head that has bowed to spiritual law. The world teaches people to avoid the cross. Take the path of least resistance, it says. Protect your image, feed your ego, shield yourself from discomfort. But I say unto you, the discomfort is sacred when it leads to divine transformation. The cross must be carried daily. It is the discipline of the tongue, the rejection of appearances, the refusal to curse what looks like lack. Every time you bless what bruises you, every time you declare truth over what contradicts it, you are bearing the cross and forging the crown. You are laying down the noisy, anxious, personality-driven self and calling forth the I am, the Christ, the true identity that knows no lack, no defeat, no fear. Christ carried his cross publicly and was mocked for it. So will you be. If you choose truth over performance, surrender over striving, declaration over doubt, you will be misunderstood. But I tell you, beloved, the cross precedes the coronation. Do not resist it. Do not explain it away. The old self will cry out, "This is death," and I say, "Yes, and it is resurrection." When you speak the word over your cross, when you say, "This situation cannot defeat me, it can only reveal me," then you lift the burden into glory. You rise with it. You no longer suffer under it. You ascend. I have seen those who looked defeated on the outside, cast down, rejected, forgotten by man, but they bore their crosses with honor. They blessed the dry ground, they thanked God for the empty cupboard, they spoke wealth while holding pennies. And one day, the crown came, not always in ways the world recognized, but they ruled. They ruled their emotions, they ruled their circumstances, and they ruled their reality through the spoken word of truth. This is the mystery of the cross. What feels like loss is really the path of dominion. What feels like death is the threshold of divine kingship. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, though crowned with divinity, chose the cross to reveal his resurrection. The cross is your transformation. The cross is your refinement. The cross is the death of the old name and the rise of the I am. Speak it daily, carry it boldly, and wear your crown in silence, knowing that you did not earn it by striving. You received it by spiritual law. The word was spoken, the self was surrendered, and the throne appeared. That is how the kingdom is revealed. I die to fear, I rise in faith. I say it again, with the thunder of heaven and the joy of resurrection. I die to fear, I rise in faith. For fear is not mine, it is a garment of dust, a voice of the grave, a shadow that flees when I speak light. I rise because I speak. I ascend because I declare. I refuse to walk beneath the burden of false appearances. I speak the word that lifts me. I speak the word that frees me. And in my speaking, the fetters fall, the tombstone rolls back, and I emerge, not as I was, but as I am. Born anew by declaration, birthed in truth, washed in the silence of divine remembrance. I no longer walk with the dead thoughts of doubt. I no longer feast with the ghosts of guilt. I die to fear. I rise in faith. My words bury bondage. Every syllable I release is a shovelful of power thrown onto the grave of my former chains. Every declaration is a hammer blow against the lock. Every truth spoken is a burial cloth wrapped around deception. I no longer entertain the idea that bondage is real, for it only lived in the unspoken places. Now I speak. I speak until every shackle trembles. I speak until every lie dissolves in the fire of my certainty. I speak the burial of limitation. I speak the funeral of fear. I speak the silence of every false name ever assigned to me. My words are not suggestions. They are sentences, final and binding, uttered with the authority of divine law. My words bury bondage. My mouth is the tomb and the trumpet. Out of this mouth comes death to error and resurrection to truth. It is both the grave and the gate. What I speak, I entomb. What I declare, I resurrect. With one breath I bury shame, and with the next I raise dignity. I have seen the power of this mouth. It has spoken itself into darkness, but now it speaks itself into light. It is no longer a mirror of the world. It is the mover of the world. I trumpet justice. I trumpet increase. I trumpet health, joy, love, and divine right outcomes. This mouth is not neutral. It is not idle. It is holy. It is dangerous to all that is false and dormant. My mouth is the tomb and the trumpet. I speak the funeral of failure. I will not weep over what never belonged to me. I will not eulogize the lie. I gather no flowers for what God never planted. I speak ashes over every betrayal, every collapse, every almost that haunted my soul. I lay them to rest, not with sorrow, but with song. For I have learned that failure is not an enemy, but a fallen mask. And I now speak the funeral, not in sadness, but in spiritual finality. No memory may resurrect it. No echo may call it back. The tomb is sealed. The stone is rolled. The obituary is written. Here lies failure, unclaimed, unnamed, undone. I speak the funeral of failure, and I rise as the heir of divine success. Old names no longer reach me. not the name I was called by those in fear, not the name I answered to in seasons of compromise. I am no longer accessible to insult, to limitation, to inherited shame. The mail of judgment is returned unopened. The voice of ridicule finds no audience. I have moved beyond the reach of old names. You may call, but I no longer come. I dwell in the high tower of I Am. I reside in the mansion of divine remembrance. I have no allegiance to the mask. I answer only to truth. I bow only to God. I am not who I was called. I am who I call myself. Old names no longer reach me. I walk in divine dominion. This path beneath my feet is not random. It is paved with intention, lit by intuition, and guarded by angels. I do not walk alone, nor do I walk in circles. I walk as one who knows. I walk as one who commands. I do not request, I declare. I do not negotiate, I decree. For I have been given authority, not to dominate others, but to dominate appearances, not to control men, but to control thought. Every step I take is ordered. Every word I speak is honored. Every desire I voice is fulfilled. I am not a wanderer. I am a walker in divine dominion. The grave clothes are off. I will not carry yesterday's narrative into today's rising. I strip off the linen of limitation. I cast away the bandages of borrowed belief. I no longer smell of the tomb. I no longer look like the dead. I walk out fresh, whole, clean, clothed in power, draped in destiny. I do not need to explain my resurrection. I do not owe the past a final word. The grave clothes are off. Let every accusation fall silent. Let every former role be burned. I have been called forth. I have been unbound. I have been loosed. And I now walk, not as the wounded, but as the wonder. The grave clothes are off. I speak and I rise. It is as simple and as sacred as that. No striving, no forcing, no begging. I open my mouth in truth and up I go. The lower law collapses. The former reality unravels. I speak from the throne and all of heaven rushes to perform it. I speak and I rise. Higher than logic, higher than memory, higher than doubt, higher than every whispered curse. I speak and I rise, not because I am strong, but because I am surrendered. I speak and I rise, not because I earned it, but because I inherited it. I speak and I rise, not because of me, but because I am aligned with truth. There is no more delay, no more permission to be granted, no more waiting room. My soul has heard my mouth, and now the bones are moving. The tomb is shaking, the heavens are opening. I speak and I rise. I say to you now, lift your voice, lift your spine, lift your soul, for this is not the hour of retreat, this is the hour of resurrection. Speak after me, not timidly, not analytically, not philosophically, but as one who has seen the grave of the old self and dared to rise without it. I am not interested in the version of you that keeps waiting. I am not speaking to the one rehearsing lack, delay, and explanation. I call forth the one who knows, the one who remembers, the one who dares to say, I am risen, I am released, I am returned to divine design. Let us walk together in rhythm now, for the word spoken in cadence strikes the chains of the subconscious. It unlocks the prison of inertia. It turns mourning into marching. Repeat me now. Feel it move through your mouth, into your body, across your timeline. Every phrase is a chisel. Every echo is a key. I release the self that fears. I rise in the self that knows. I release the self that delays. I rise in the self that declares. I release the self that clings. I rise in the self that circulates. I release the self that hides. I rise in the self that shines. I release the self that obeys fear. I rise in the self that commands. I release the self that pleads. I rise in the self that proclaims. I release the self that needs permission. I rise in the self that walks in dominion. I release the self that waits for signs. I rise in the self that is the sign. I release the self that apologizes. I rise in the self that authorizes. I release the self that hoards. I rise in the self that multiplies. I release the self that is unsure. I rise in the self that is unshakable. I release the self that is tired. I rise in the self that is timeless. I release the self that doubts. I rise in the self that declares, "This is the hour." This is the hour of resurrection. This is the hour of return. This is the hour of light. Let your very blood remember. Let your bones awaken. Let your mouth become the gate of your resurrection. The old you has been buried beneath opinions, confusion, compromise, and delay. And yet the true self waits like a lion at the gate, not waiting to be worthy, but waiting to be spoken. I tell you, this is not just a sequence. This is a sentence breaker. This is a rhythm that ruptures what's false. I do not care how many times you've tried. You are not here to try. You are here to rise. Again, we declare, I release the self that resists. I rise in the self that rejoices. I release the self that recoils. I rise in the self that reigns. I release the self that conforms. I rise in the self that creates. I release the self that complains. I rise in the self that commands the storm. I release the self that rehearses loss. I rise in the self that multiplies life. I release the self that obeys fear's voice. I rise in the self that knows only truth. I release the self that withers. I rise in the self that waters. I release the self that fears lack. I rise in the self that lives in the flow. I release the self that bends. I rise in the self that builds. I release the self that doubts divine timing. I rise in the self that knows it is now. I release the self that dies daily by fear. I rise in the self that resurrects daily by the word. I release the self that fears the tomb. I rise in the self that rolls away the stone. And now we seal it. Seal it not with passive belief, but with the fire of authority, the voice that speaks from the mountaintop, the garden and the furnace alike. Repeat now 3 times until the atmosphere shifts. This is my hour. I bury the false. I rise in truth. This is my hour. I bury the false. I rise in truth. This is my hour. I bury the false. I rise in truth. Let no one say they did not hear. Let no fear say it was not rebuked. Let no dream say it was not called forth. The word has been spoken. The resurrection has begun. And it begins where it always begins, in the mouth of the awakened, the daring, the faithful, the free. Now rise. The old self cannot wear the garments of glory. I once met a man crushed under the heavy garments of shame. He had spoken over himself again and again, I am weak. I always fail. I am not enough. And as surely as the farmer plants his seed and reaps a harvest, this man had reaped ruin. His relationships withered, his finances collapsed, and the world seemed to mirror back his unspoken belief, "You do not belong in dominion." But I said to him, "You are not who the world has named. You are not the bruised label the past placed on your back. Speak a new name, rewrite your decree, bury that name in the tomb it belongs." And I handed him the divine trowel, words soaked in power. I told him to speak aloud each day. I am the structure of strength. I am built with God's law in my bones. My tongue resurrects power. My past has no permission to speak. For 7 days he fasted from the old phrases. Every time the lie tried to rise, he crucified it with truth. And as surely as seed breaks forth under divine pressure, his strength returned. Not a weak imitation, but a holy, unshakable, masculine stillness. He began to walk with calm, his voice lowered, His back straightened. He no longer shrank in shame, for he had spoken shame into the ground and called forth structure in its place. Friends said, "You've changed." But it wasn't change, it was resurrection. He did not become someone else, he became the real man, buried beneath borrowed labels. I tell you now, if the tomb of shame has held you captive, speak like he spoke. Look shame in the face and say, "You are not me. You are the old name, and I bury you with full authority." Say it now. I do not carry shame, I carry strength. I do not echo weakness, I originate structure. I am not the past, I am the Word made flesh. And watch what begins to rise. There was a woman who came to me burdened not by visible chains, but by the words she had sewn into the fabric of her being. Her name, as she knew it, was not what was written on paper. It was what she had spoken in secret, in suffering, and in silence. She called herself broke. She called herself too much. She whispered behind her smile, "It's too late for me." And though no man had imprisoned her, her life bore all the symptoms of confinement. For the name she answered to in spirit was a name never given by God. The name she answered to was lack. The name she bowed to was shame. And the word says, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." Yet every time she denied her divine inheritance, she broke that law. For to be made in the image of God is to be spoken of with power, and she had let the world name her with poverty's mouth. I said to her, "Daughter, the lie cannot live unless you lend it breath. And you've been breathing life into false names long enough." I instructed her to no longer respond to broke. If someone spoke it, she was to treat it as if it were never said. When her bank account tempted her with emptiness, she was to speak aloud, "My name is not lack, my name is supply, the name my Father gave me." She was to answer no more to "too late." Instead, she declared daily, "I walk in divine timing, and nothing is behind." She was to silence the echo of too much with the rhythm of, "I am the perfect expression of divine abundance. There is nothing excessive in the image of God." And oh, how swiftly the Spirit moves when the lie is cast down. Within weeks, her countenance changed. Her voice no longer trembled when she prayed. Her requests became declarations. Her apologies turned into decrees. And the miracle was not that she received more, but that she finally stopped refusing what had always been hers. For your wealth, your wholeness, your wonder are not waiting to be earned. They are waiting for you to agree with your real name. She said to me, "I did not add anything to my life. I simply removed what I was never meant to carry. I laid down every cursed label and picked up my divine title." So I ask you now, what names have you worn that do not belong to you? What titles have you accepted from fear, from family, from failure? Rip them off, speak them dead, and declare, "I am named by God. I answer only to increase. I respond only to truth. I reject the name of lack, delay, drama, and defeat. I rise when called by favor, by fullness, by power." Your old name must die for your real one to rise. You cannot call yourself not enough and expect a full harvest. The name you wear is the life you build. So wear abundance, answer to joy, and let every word spoken over you that is not of God fall to the ground without root or return. The curse breaks when you stop repeating it. The shame ends when you stop answering to it. The rise begins the moment you stop claiming a life that never belonged to you. A man came to me many years ago who could not understand why his work stagnated, his business delayed, and his contracts slipped through his hands like sand through fingers. He had skill. He had strategy. He had offers lined up, but they always disappeared before they bore fruit. "I don't understand," he said. "I show up, I prepare, I negotiate, but nothing ever crosses the line." And I said to him with clarity, "You do not have a business problem, you have a self-declaration problem." You see, He had not stepped into the self that delivers. He was still speaking from the old man, the one who delays, who doubts, who hopes, but never commands. He was showing up in form, but not in word. And so I asked him, "What do you call yourself before you walk into a meeting?" He paused. He confessed that he often rehearsed failure. What if they don't choose me? What if they say no again? What if this isn't the right time? These are not business thoughts. These are death thoughts. These are not declarations of dominion. These are shadows in the mouth. I gave him a new word, a new mantle. I no longer delay. I now deliver. I told him to speak it every morning. Speak it while lacing his shoes. Speak it while driving to meet a client. Speak it under his breath while shaking hands. Not as a trick, not as a sales tactic, but as a resurrection. Because you cannot deliver contracts if you still embody delay. You cannot unlock abundance if your mouth is still the mouth of postponement. You must declare yourself new before the world will respond. You must take your place as already risen. And what happened next? One by one, clients who had gone cold reached back out. Invoices that had stalled were suddenly released. A client he thought had ghosted him entirely sent a message saying, "We're ready. Let's move." Why? Because he moved first. He spoke from a new identity, and all things responded. You see, the outer world is never late. Your inner word is what leads the dance, and when your identity shifts, supply follows. The truth is this: the old version of you cannot receive what the new version is designed for. Speak the new self, or the new supply will never recognize your address. That man now speaks these words over his calendar, over his emails, over his own thoughts. I no longer delay. I now deliver. My presence closes every open loop. My word finishes what fear began. I am the end of confusion and the beginning of clarity. I no longer stall. I circulate. I release. I multiply. I deliver. And so I say to you, stop calling yourself trying. Stop calling yourself waiting. Stop naming yourself almost. Life does not respond to almost. Heaven does not pour out for maybe. You must speak like one who already is. Your identity must match your assignment. You must call yourself risen or remain among the unchosen. Speak it now. Speak it boldly. Say, I no longer delay. I now deliver. And it shall be done unto you. I remember the woman who stood before me, trembling not with fear, but with the reverberation of a decision that shook her entire bloodline. She said, "It ends with me." And I say what begins. That was not poetry. That was power. That was spoken dominion. Her words were not formed out of human pride, nor emotional drama. They came from the altar, for she had suffered long, and she had suffered silently, as many women do, swallowing lack, inheriting fear, recycling patterns of survival so deeply coded into her speech that even her laughter was laced with apology. Her mother had spoken poverty as if it were prayer. Her grandmother had spoken silence as if it were safety. And now here she stood, weary from the war but weaponized by truth. She had learned the law, that the mouth is generational real estate, that curses can run through family lines not as superstitions, but as speech. And she had seen it, how one woman's shame becomes the next woman's scarcity. How what her mother feared, she inherited. How what her grandmother swallowed, she too digested. But this woman did not come to me for comfort. She came for combustion. She came to burn the bridge between the old and the new, and she asked, "How do I become the resurrection in my family tree?" And I said, "You must speak the funeral first. You must give death to the lie that says, this runs in our blood. You must bury the myth that says, we've always been this way. You must declare that your DNA is not your destiny unless your mouth agrees." So she walked through her house, through every room where memory had settled like dust, and she said out loud, "I release the speech of struggle. I release the loyalty to limitation. I release the inherited fear of men, of money, of miracles. I release the weight of what was never mine to carry. I declare, it ends with me. I declare, I no longer eat the bread of sorrow. I declare, my children will never hear me speak the language of lack again. And the atmosphere changed, not with fanfare, not with lightning, but with authority. Something shifted in the silence, because silence had been the language of suppression, and now the sound of truth, released through the spoken word, shattered the spell. Beloved, I tell you this plainly. Your past does not possess the power to perpetuate itself unless you give it voice. If you are still repeating the words your parents spoke in fear, you are still tethered to their experience. If you are still rehearsing old narratives of suffering, you are not honoring your lineage, you are extending its bondage. Let the dead bury the dead. Let the fearful keep their stories. But you must speak as the resurrection and the life. For the curse ends not by therapy, not by thought, but by declaration. It is the word that breaks the yoke. It is the word that severs the inheritance of shame. And it is the word, spoken with boldness, that initiates a new bloodline of boldness, of blessing, of divine supply. Do not say, but I come from nothing. Say, I come from God, and through me all things are made new. Do not say, but we've always struggled. Say, this household now lives under grace, not generational grief. Do not say, but I don't know how. Say, I am taught of the Lord, and great is the peace of my children. If you knew what your words activated, you would never again let your mouth wander into fear. Speak not what was, speak what must now be. Declare daily, I am the first fruits of freedom in my family. I speak as one delivered. I speak as one chosen. I speak as one through whom God plants a new garden. And this time, we will not be cast out. This time, we are home. For every curse must bow to the woman who knows who she is. For every bondage breaks when one voice rises above the pattern. And if you are that voice, then say it with me now. It ends with me. And I say, what begins? You must not search for the living among the dead. You must not beg life from the grave of your past. He is not here, he is risen. The Christ walked out of the tomb, but he left the grave clothes behind. And so must you. There is no resurrection without a burial. There is no rising without relinquishing the remnants of bondage, the opinions, the names, the fears, the self-images that once swaddled your identity in death. I tell you now, the old self must die, and it must be spoken dead with bold command. The tomb is empty because the lie is over. The story of lack is over. The cycle of self-betrayal, submission, and spiritual smallness is over. But you must stop dragging the linens of loss into your new life. You cannot resurrect while wearing grave clothes. Many cry out, "Where is my demonstration? Where is my answered prayer?" Yet they sit inside the tomb of doubt, clinging to the very identity that crucified their supply, their peace, their self-expression. You cannot enter the kingdom while clinging to a corpse. You must roll away the stone with your word. Declare now, I speak death to the former me. I release every version of myself that ever settled, begged, shrank, or feared. That self is not here. That self is finished. That self has no breath, no authority, no place in the kingdom of the risen word. Even the angels at the tomb said, "Why seek ye the living among the dead?" The voice of heaven will never answer you inside the vocabulary of fear. The voice of spirit will not speak to the name you gave yourself in defeat. God never called you unworthy. God never gave you the identity of not enough. Those garments were given to you by error, fear, karma, family, and misbelief. And now they must be folded, left behind, and burned by the fire of truth. When Jesus rose, he was recognized not by appearance, but by presence, and so it shall be with you. When you release the former costume of your struggle, your friends will say, "Is it you?" And you shall answer, "It is the I am in me that lives. The former things are passed away." Do not pray to be comforted in the tomb. Do not ask me to decorate your place of spiritual death. Do not cry for a resurrection while defending the old name. If you want new life, speak new life. Lazarus, come forth, was not a polite suggestion. It was a violent word of extraction. It was the voice of dominion calling spirit out of entombed identity, and the same command must go forth from your mouth. Speak to yourself as Christ spoke to Lazarus. Speak to your finances, your worth, your mission. Call them forth. But first, roll away the stone. First, open your mouth and command the death of the old agreement. Until then, the resurrection is blocked. Until then, the angels remain unanswered. Until then, the tomb stays full of excuses, and the linens of the old identity stay wrapped around your future. So I ask you now, what is still buried that must be spoken dead? What costume of defeat are you still wearing? What old self still clings to you like grave clothes around a body that longs to rise? Leave it. Lay it down. Speak the word of separation and cross over into your own spiritual resurrection. The tomb is empty. But the question remains, will you be, or will you stay entangled in what is already dead? This is the way of dominion. Not to manage the old identity, not to reform the grave clothes, not to negotiate with fear, but to leave it all behind with a final declaration. I am no longer the one who dies. I am the risen self. I am the Christed word in motion. The tomb has no light for you, only the word does. Step into it, speak from it, and rise. I do not speak in metaphor, I speak in law. The raising of Lazarus is not a miracle bound by history. It is not a relic of scripture for the pious to recite. It is the living pattern of resurrection by the spoken word. Lazarus was not raised by effort. He was not stirred by weeping. He was not lifted by sympathy. He responded to command. He heard his name called through the tomb of limitation, and by that call, he was loosed from the grip of death. And so I say to you, if there is any part of your life that appears bound, any dream you have buried, any identity you have wrapped in cloth and declared too late, you do not heal it with emotion. You do not negotiate with decay. You do not rationalize the grave. You call it by name and you say, "Come forth." The words of Jesus were not decorative, they were directive. Lazarus, come forth. He did not say, "Please." He did not ask, "If it be thy will." He did not hold a healing circle or search for permission. He spoke with dominion, and the dead obeyed. So must you speak over your dead finances, over the body declared terminal, over the marriage labeled unrecoverable, over the gifts and callings you have entombed under the weight of fear. You speak, not to the condition, but to the identity. You speak to the true self, the God-appointed Lazarus within, and you summon it. You do not bury what heaven has named. You do not mourn what you have the authority to resurrect. But listen carefully. Jesus did not roll the stone. He told the others to do it. This means your word will raise the dead, but your willingness must roll the stone. If your heart is hardened, your excuses too large, your fears too familiar, your stone too heavy with false beliefs, your Lazarus will stay bound. The word is power, but you must participate in your own resurrection. There is no neutral speech in the realm of the Spirit. Every word is either calling Lazarus forth or sealing his tomb. The question is not whether you are speaking. The question is what your words are doing. Are they embalming the old self or commanding the new to rise? Are you re-wrapping the grave cloths of identity, or are you shouting over the tomb? Life and death are not distant judgments. They are in your tongue. You are not a victim of time. You are not waiting for divine pity. You are the mouthpiece of God, and what you say must echo resurrection or prolong decay. When I hear someone say, "I'll never recover," I say to them, "Then you have made it law." When I hear, "It's too late for me," I say, "Then you have sealed your own grave." But when a man, bankrupt and broken, says, "This is not the end, my good comes forth," I see the stone roll. I see movement in the darkness. I see linen unwrap. Because the name of the true self has been called. And the name was not loser. It was not addict. It was not failure. The name was life. Let me give you a new instruction. Instead of rehearsing what you've lost, start declaring what is rising. Instead of defining yourself by what has died, begin speaking to what must come alive. I do not care how long it has been buried. 4 days, 4 decades. The moment you speak from the Christ within, the grave loses its grip. The ego cannot hold what the Spirit has summoned. The lie cannot linger when the truth is declared. Say aloud, even now, "I am not what I lost. I am what God raises." Say it again, not from emotion, but from identity. I am not what I lost. I am what God raises. You do not resurrect through grief. You resurrect through governance. And you have been given dominion. You have been entrusted with the power to raise dead things. So stop weeping. Stop explaining. Stop waiting for the conditions to change. Face the tomb. Open your mouth. And call the life back by name. Come forth. Come forth. Come forth. The old self is buried. The true self is rising. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is not poetry. It is blueprint. It is law. It is your divine inheritance written in the vibration of eternity. When I speak of the Word, I do not speak of idle chatter or emotional outbursts. I speak of the force that formed light out of void, land out of sea, abundance out of chaos. When the Spirit of God moved upon the waters, it did not weep, plead, or wish. It spoke, and the speaking divided light from darkness, life from death, manifestation from void. This same word is in your mouth, dear listener. Not a future version of you, not a version that has healed enough, or learned enough, or read enough. I mean you, the one listening now, breathing now, aching now. The word is in your mouth. And the moment you understand that your mouth is not an emotional valve but a spiritual weapon, you will never again speak like a victim, live like a beggar, or wait like an orphan. You have spoken as if you are God's employee, waiting on assignment, approval, or payment. But I say to you, you are the heir, not the hireling. Speak accordingly. The word does not describe life, it divides it. The word does not report reality, it releases it. So long as you continue to use your mouth to confirm appearance instead of command spirit, you will be ruled by what you could dominate. When you say, "I am tired," you are commanding weariness to anchor itself in your bones. When you say, "I never get ahead," you are licensing stagnation to set up shop in your affairs. You are not speaking about your life, you are speaking as your life, because the Word was not just with God, the Word was God. And you, created in the image and likeness of the Most High, are also endowed with the authority to separate light from darkness with your tongue. The word you speak is the world you live in. If you want a new world, you must release a new word. When I say God, I speak of principle, law, spirit, pure power, and that power never lies dormant. It is always listening for the voice of command. But too many speak the language of confusion, uncertainty, and self-deprecation, and then call it humility. But let me tell you, humility is not self-doubt cloaked in reverence. True humility is bold agreement with God's idea of you. To say, "I am what He says I am," is not arrogance, it is alignment. To say, "My word is law unto my world," is not pride, it is participation. It is joining your voice to the voice of creation. You are not a bystander. You are not here to merely interpret your life. You are here to create it, with your word, with your declaration, with your holy insistence on truth. If you wish to see a new life, You must stop worshiping the old one. Stop rehearsing its wounds. Stop memorializing its drama. Stop narrating it as if it holds power. Death only reigns when the word is silent. But the moment you speak in the name of truth, death loses its grip. When Jesus stood before Lazarus's tomb, he did not negotiate with decay. He did not analyze the past. He did not require anyone's permission. He simply spoke, "Lazarus, come forth." That is what the word does. It calls the living thing to rise. It calls the buried dream to awaken. It calls the divine blueprint to take form. And when you know that your voice is no less anointed, you will stop whispering fear and begin thundering faith. So I say unto you now, resurrect your voice. Strip it of sarcasm, strip it of smallness, strip it of self-pity, and dress it in the garment of divine command. Speak not what you feel, speak what is true. Say, I am the light of my world. Say, I decree new life where death once ruled. Say, my word is the womb of the new. Because you do not beg God to intervene. You speak God into the situation. The word was God, and the word is in you. Say it now. I separate myself from the grave by the word. I speak, and it is so. I release, and it is done. And remember this. When you speak from your divine identity, all of heaven backs your voice. You are not echoing hope. You are embodying authority. So do not wait for permission. Do not consult the appearance, and do not doubt the echo. Speak, and let the word divide your light from darkness. Speak, and let the new thing rise. I stood one night, alone, before the mirror in the dark. The world was asleep. No spotlight of reason shone on me. No voice of logic interrupted. The chatter of the day had died. In that holy silence, I spoke. I said, by morning I rise. And heaven heard me, for it is in the darkness, when nothing appears to change, that everything is commanded to change. Man is not resurrected in crowds. He is not reborn under applause. The new self rises in secret, in the tomb of stillness, under the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I knew in that moment I was not waiting on conditions to improve. I was not begging for new evidence. I was birthing the evidence by speaking it. That mirror did not show me my past. It showed me my power. I looked myself in the eyes and said, this is not who I was. This is who I am becoming. My old identity is a corpse. I am no longer embalming it with fear. I am no longer eulogizing it with excuses. I speak the death of delay, the death of doubt, the death of that voice that told me I was not enough. I am risen. This is the midnight resurrection, the silent deliverance, the womb of the spoken word. You do not need permission from the world to rise. You do not need proof. You need only the mirror and the word. By morning, I rise. Not maybe, not hopefully, not eventually, but by divine law, by the command of truth, I rise. The subconscious receives the word in darkness. It obeys it like seed planted in midnight soil. The soil does not argue. The mirror does not debate. The law does not ask how. It asks if you will speak, and I have spoken. I did not say, I wish to change. I said, I am changed. I did not say, I hope things get better. I said, I walk in resurrection now. And though the outer world still resembled a tomb, the stone had already rolled away. The shift had already occurred in spirit. Because I do not wait for conditions to rise, I command them to. I declare, and so it is. And to all who dare speak with me in the night, I say, meet yourself in the mirror of midnight. Look not at your history, but at your holiness. Touch not your wounds, but your word. And say aloud, by morning I rise, and all that has held me is broken. This is not metaphor. This is spiritual law. Resurrection is not a story. It is your inheritance. But you must speak it while the world sleeps. You must prophesy to the bones while nothing moves. You must become the trumpet in your own tomb. And when you do, the grave cannot hold you, because I have learned. The midnight mirror hears more than daylight minds ever will. And when I speak there, I rise. There comes a sacred moment in every soul's unfolding where it must speak words not of embellishment or improvement, but of absolute renunciation. For no one rises into the Christ consciousness by negotiation with the ego. It must be dethroned, dismantled, declared dead, and in its place must stand a voice so rooted in spiritual knowing, so certain of its divine identity, that it dares to say, "This is not who I am anymore." That phrase is not a confession of guilt or a tender appeal to change. It is a spiritual sword. It is a dismissal of the false self, a spoken crucifixion of every lie you once called life. I have seen it pierce through years of stagnation, dissolving stories, attachments, and identities in an instant when spoken with unwavering faith. For in the moment you declare that who you have been is no longer acceptable to your spirit, heaven responds. The word does not return void. Angels marshal. Circumstances reorder. The walls of Jericho crumble. But hear me. This phrase cannot be whispered. It cannot be entertained in theory or muttered in doubt. It must thunder from the center of your being with the same power Christ used when he said, "Lazarus, come forth." When you speak this phrase, you are not describing a goal, you are announcing a spiritual verdict. You are ending the reign of limitation in your life. You are burying the scarcity identity, the victim identity, the anxious identity. You are canceling the former script and returning to the author and finisher of your faith. And when the soul speaks with finality, the world must comply. Appearances may linger like shadows, but they are no longer real to you. They are echoes, shells, phantoms without power. For once you say, "This is not who I am anymore," you enter into covenant with a higher identity. You step under new authority. You no longer answer to fear, to addiction, to rejection. You report only to truth. You respond only to the Spirit of God, declaring, "Behold, I make all things new." And what of the past? What of the memories and regrets? Let them rise, but only so they may be dismissed. You do not argue with the corpse. You do not debate with the grave. You speak resurrection, not rationalization. You say to every image of your former self, "Depart, you have no power here," and the spell breaks. That is the mystery of dominion. Not that we fix the old self, but that we bury it. Not that we heal what never belonged to us, but that we deny it permission to speak again. For when I speak the words, "This is not who I am anymore," I am not trying to become someone new. I am agreeing with the eternal self I have always been in God. I am remembering heaven's original idea of me, and in that memory is fire, is power, is peace. The true self needs no defense, no performance, no apology. It simply waits for your authority to say the phrase that heaven cannot ignore, "This is not who I am anymore." And when you say it not as a wish, but as a verdict, not as a hope, but as a sentence passed on all limitation. And let that word, like the stone rolled away from the tomb, declare to all creation, a new life has begun. I now speak to those who are tired of circling the same desert, tired of calling the corpse of their former self their identity, tired of defending the pain that was only meant to pass through. Hear me. Your deliverance is not delayed. It is only disguised behind a door you refuse to shut. You cannot walk into your resurrection with the name tag of your crucifixion still pinned to your chest. You must renounce it. You must bury it. You must take your word like a sword and sever the lie from your life. I tell you again, the old self does not die by time. The old self dies by declaration. And there are 3 sentences that open the tomb and call forth the new. The first is this: I no longer answer to that name. For many are still bound because they keep answering to identities that no longer belong to them. You said you were the anxious one, the broken one, the poor one, the black sheep, the victim of betrayal, the one who never gets chosen. And every time you answered to that vibration, you renewed your lease in a prison that heaven already unlocked. But I tell you now, when you stop answering to the wrong name, the lie withers. Every time the world calls you lack and you say, I no longer answer to that name, you are denying the flesh and choosing the Christ within. Every time your memory calls you failure and you say, I no longer answer to that name, you are casting out the unclean spirit of self-pity. This is the spoken death. This is the beginning of spiritual crucifixion, the spoken disidentification from the false identity. For as it is written, he that loseth his life shall find it, and that life begins not in feeling, but in speech. When you speak against the old name, you break its agreement. And all of hell trembles when a woman who once said, I'm just this way, begins to say, I no longer answer to that name. She is not confused. She is crowning herself with truth. The second sentence is this: I cancel that role. Oh, how many are trapped in unconscious performances. You have played the savior, the struggler, the scapegoat, the quiet one, the fighter, the forgotten. You have worn these roles for so long that you mistake them for character. But your soul was never meant to act. It was meant to declare. I tell you now, every false role is a contract written by fear and sustained by silence. But when you speak the words, I cancel that role, you dissolve the stage, you tear down the set, you release every person who kept you there, including yourself. This is not fantasy. This is law. As surely as an actor may walk off the set and never return, so too may you. But you must say it aloud, with the dignity of one who sees themselves as divine. I cancel that role. I do not play the one who is always late, always too much, always not enough. That part is finished. That play is closed. You may feel empty at first, but the vacancy is holy. It is the space through which the Christ consciousness enters. For until you vacate the throne of the false self, the spirit cannot sit down in power. And the third sentence is this: that agreement is broken. For some have spoken the first two, yet find the chains still clinking in the corner of their mind. Why? Because an agreement was made. You agreed with a word spoken over you. You agreed with the curse of a parent, the label of a diagnosis, the limit of a teacher, the script of your culture. And even if you never spoke it aloud, you signed it in silence. But here is the holy truth. What you agreed to by fear, you can break by faith. And the power lies in your tongue. That agreement is broken. I tear the contract. I dissolve the vibration. I erase the name. Say it, declare it, decree it. For thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. Every spell must be broken by a stronger word, and there is no word stronger than a word spoken in the authority of Christ within. So I tell you, speak boldly, not as the one who is trying to get free, but as the one who is free and now claims it. I no longer answer to that name. I cancel that role. That agreement is broken. Say them aloud. Whisper them in the dark if you must. Roar them when you're ready. Write them in the air with your tongue of fire. And as surely as the tomb cracked and the stone rolled away, so too will your old self fall and your true self rise. Let the mouth be your blade. Let the word be your resurrection. Let the death be spoken, that the Christ may rise. Beloved, if you would rise into your true self, you must first rise in word. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and I tell you now, resurrection begins not with struggle, but with speech. Many try to reform the self through effort, through penance, through years of self-study and striving, but the soul is not born through effort. The soul is born through utterance. It is the word that raises Lazarus, not the hand. It is the word that parts the Red Sea, not the foot. The word of God is your resurrection stone, and when it is laid upon the tomb of your past, the old shall fall back, and the new shall rise. when you speak from the Christ mind, when you speak from divine memory, when you speak as one who has already overcome, the grave clothes unravel, and your former identity dissolves like smoke in the presence of fire. Say it with me now. I live in full divine memory. Not the memory of wounds, delays, betrayals, or what man said you could never be, but the memory of heaven, the memory of completion, the memory of your eternal name, the memory of who you were before you were born and who you remain in spirit even now. The world trained you to forget your power, to forget your source, to forget your dominion. But the Christ within you never forgets. The Christ within you remembers the divine plan. The Christ within you remembers the spoken blueprint of your fulfillment, and when you align your tongue with His word, you draw it into the scene. I live in full divine memory. I remember who I am. I remember that I am supplied. I remember that I am chosen. I remember that I am complete. Every time you remember your divine identity, you erase a curse from the human one. Every time you remember your oneness with God, you disarm the machinery of fear and spin the wheel of divine fortune. The floodgates open not because you begged, but because you remembered. Say it again. I live in full divine memory. And now the scroll unrolls. And now your days rearrange. And now your name is cleared, your health is restored, your money flows like a river unblocked, all because you remembered. Now say the second word. I act as if I've already won. This is no pretend game. This is not performance. This is prophecy. To act as if you have already won is to stand in the position of divine finality. It is to walk as the victor, not the victim. To prepare the house as if the guest has already accepted the invitation. Faith is not waiting. Faith is arrangement. Faith is not hesitation. It is choreography. To act as if you've already won is to reject the delay. It is to reject the discussion. It is to reject the lie that your good still hangs in the balance. I never teach hesitation. I teach fulfillment. In the kingdom, nothing is on the way. It is either spoken or it is withheld by silence. When you move as one who has already received, you collapse the distance between the invisible and the visible. When you move as one who already possesses, you enter divine jurisdiction. When you dine like a queen, even in a hut, heaven must supply the palace. Say it with me again. I act as if I've already won. And by that word, every conditional contract is cancelled, and a new decree is issued from heaven's high court. No more begging, no more hoping, no more living as if your answer is pending. It is finished. Move accordingly. And now, the third word, the highest word. I am now who God says I am. Not who your history says, not who the report says, not who your mother feared or your father failed to bless. You are now who God says you are. Do you hear me? Not later. Now for the I am never operates in the future. The I am is always now. If you say, I will be, you delay heaven. If you say, I'm becoming, you empower process and sabotage miracle. But when you say, I am now who God says I am, you summon the thunder of the eternal to reconfigure your present hour. Let the weak say, I am strong, not when the symptoms go, not when the boss sees your worth, not when the funds appear. The strength is activated in the saying, not in the seeing. The title is bestowed in the declaration, not in the resume. The healing is born in the word, not in the scan. When you say it, you become it. When you say it, you shed the lie. When you say it, the veil is torn and the Christ is revealed in you. So say it until every cell in your body kneels to it. Say it until your name changes. Say it until your life obeys. I am now who God says I am. Let these three be your sword. Let them be your ladder. Let them be your morning, your banner, your breath. Speak them over your sleep. Declare them over your bank account. Whisper them over your shadow self until it dissolves in holy light. These are not affirmations. These are recreations. And every time you speak them, the dust of delay is shaken off, the chains of condition break, and you are ushered into the dimension where your divine self lives, rules, and reigns forever. Say them again. I live in full divine memory. I act as if I've already won. I am now who God says I am. This is your resurrection script. This is your scroll of dominion. And this, beloved, is the word that calls you forth from every tomb you thought you could not escape. You are not healing. You are resurrecting. The old self was never meant to be rehabilitated, negotiated with, pitied, or preserved. It was meant to be buried. The old patterns, the old limitations, the old names you called yourself, the old roles you accepted, all of it was a garment of death. And I say to you now, in the name of truth, take off the grave clothes. You are not a work in progress. You are a living word, and the moment you speak from your Christ identity, the tomb cannot hold you. You may have tried therapy, effort, striving, waiting for a feeling to change, but that is not resurrection. Resurrection is not a process, it is a decree. When Jesus stood before the tomb of Lazarus, he did not counsel the corpse. He called him out. So too must you do now. The self you have known, the one that felt abandoned, broke, rejected, overwhelmed, that self has had enough airtime. That identity has played its final role. The curtain must fall on that act of fear, for the next scene requires a new actor, the true you. And who is this true you? It is the one who says, I and the Father are one. It is the one who no longer accepts delay, drama, or disorder as part of their story. It is the one who says, I walk in dominion now, not someday, not after enough healing, but now. For the truth about you is not developing. It is done. The Christ within you is not growing stronger. It is already perfect and only waits for your recognition. Let the weak say, I am strong. Let the broke say, I am rich. Let the forgotten say, I am favored and known. You do not wait to feel it. You speak it and the feeling aligns. You decree it and the world obeys. The old self tries to be realistic, but the risen self is prophetic. It speaks from the end. It declares from the promised land even while the wilderness still surrounds. I charge you, beloved soul, do not decorate your tomb any longer. Do not make your excuses sacred. Do not keep memorializing what God has already called dead. You are not meant to manage the old self. You are meant to bury it with the word, and once it is buried, do not look back. The woman who touched the hem of Christ did not return to the doctors. The man at the pool of Bethesda did not go back to his mat. And you, now that the word has made you whole, must not speak again as if you are still waiting. Speak as the risen one, walk as the risen one, declare as the risen one. Do not look in the mirror for evidence. Look in the word, look in the law. Look in the eternal covenant that says, Behold, I make all things new. So rise, not because you feel like it, but because it is already written. Rise, not because you earned it, but because it is your name. Rise, not to impress anyone, but to fulfill your divine decree. And when doubt whispers from the shadow of your former self, answer boldly. That one is no longer available. That name has been retired. That story has been closed. Behold, all things are new, and I speak now as the one who has risen. Amen. I do not offer you content. I offer you cadence, rhythm, revelation, the divine tempo of truth. And now, my friend, as we reach the edge of this spiritual journey, I invite you not to end, but to begin again. For every end is but a resurrection in disguise. Let this moment be the breath between death and dominion. You have walked with me through fire, through sword, through the grave of the old self and the crown of the new. Do not step back into silence now. Speak, for the word spoken is the key that reopens the tomb. Comment below, not with opinion, but with declaration. Seal this hour with the word. The old is gone. I rise by word. Do not explain it. Do not dilute it. Just declare it. As surely as Lazarus rose, your life is called forth by your mouth. You have no need of motivation, affirmation, or explanation. You need rhythm. You need to return to the sound of spiritual law and spiritual certainty. Subscribe not for more videos, but to align with the spoken life. For when you return here tomorrow and speak again, you are not consuming content. You are consecrating your mind. Let each day be a funeral for the lie and a feast for the truth. Let your very breath be a rebuke to fear and a celebration of divine remembrance. You are not here to remember who you were. You are here to remember what God has already spoken. And the word is still alive, still multiplying, still making flesh. You need not feel ready. You only need to return, to die again, to speak again, to rise again. Let the grave lose you, and let your mouth restore you. Your resurrection is not on a date, it is on your lips. The old is gone, I rise by word. Write it, speak it, live it, return tomorrow, and again the next. This is not a conclusion. This is your commission.